Welcome to Fantasy Football Insider. I am Dan Labbe, joined by Chris Fedor. If you are watching this show, you got to scroll down below the player, get in the comments, sign in, and ask your questions because you've got us for the next 15, 20 minutes here. So if you have lineup questions, waiver wire questions, anything you want to ask away, and we will get to as many questions as we can. We've talked about running backs a lot, Chris. So I want to shift gears today. Let's talk about tight ends.
Okay, that's an interesting shift.
It is, but I've got Vernon Davis, right, on my team.
It's always about his team, folks.
Yeah, exactly. I actually play Chris this week.
Yeah, right.
I've got Vernon Davis on my team, right? So he was out last week, and at the last minute, I had to go out. I had to get a tight end.
Yeah.
The guy that was out there, Martellus Bennett, Chicago, almost brought me back and won me a game against our Indians reporter, Zach Meisel. I lost still. But Vernon Davis, we don't know if he's going to play. If I'm an owner of Vernon Davis, which I am, and I can't get a guy like Martellus Bennett, who am I looking for?
I think there are a couple of different guys. Heath Miller jumps out to me. Off to a slow start this year, Dan. He's got 11 catches, 112 yards, but he plays against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and everybody saw what Atlanta did against Tampa Bay last week, putting up 56 points. Sure, it's Antonio Brown there, Le'Veon Bell. They want to run as much as possible, but if Big Ben is going to have to go to somebody other than Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, Marcus Wheaton, Heath Miller is a guy that could be a sneaky play just this week. This could be that game where he finally becomes the guy. A lot of people thought maybe at the beginning of the season he was going to be a top 10 fantasy tight end, maybe a sneaky top 5 guy. Hasn't gone down that way so far in the first 3, but this could be one of those games where he emerges as the go-to target for Big Ben in this one game because it is Tampa Bay.
The tight end position in general, how important is it to a fantasy football team? If you've got a good one, obviously, it's huge. But if you don't get one of the good ones, one of the top 2 or 3 guys, you know, we know it's a little bit of a fickle position. How important is it to kind of find those guys? And how do you approach it if you don't have one of the top guys?
Well, I think if you don't have one of the top guys, then you're kind of basing it on matchups. And that's where you look and you try and see, okay, which teams so far this year are giving up touchdowns to tight ends? Which team so far this year giving up receptions to tight ends, yards to tight ends? You try and follow the trends as much as possible. Another sneaky guy, if you're just looking for a one-week fill-in, Dan, Michael Rivera, the tight end for Oakland, playing against Miami. Miami's a team that likes to bring a lot of pressure. You've got a young rookie quarterback in Derek Carr. If he feels pressure, he might be looking for that outlet. Not to mention Miami's given up 2 touchdowns in 3 games so far to that position. So you look at those kinds of things. And then you look to see, okay, who has a chance to emerge, who has a chance to kind of come out of nowhere and be one of those sneaky fantasy tight ends the way that Jordan Cameron was last year, the way that Julius Thomas was last year for the Denver Broncos, and 2 guys so far this year. Niles Paul from the Washington Redskins getting an opportunity because Jordan Reed is still dinged up. He's probably not going to play tonight in the Thursday night game. So he's somebody to take a look at. He's got a nice rapport with Kirk Cousins because they've both been backups and they've developed that chemistry. And then Larry Donnell from the New York Giants has been a pleasant find. Eli Manning has always been a quarterback that likes to rely on his tight ends. So when you have a guy like that who's gotten off to a good start in the first 3 games, you want to try and continue to ride that wave.
Is one of the keys really kind of looking at a quarterback and saying, you know, how much does he rely on this guy? Like Brian Hoyer is a guy that we know is going to rely on his tight ends a lot. He's going to go through his reads and he's going to end up throwing the ball to his tight end. Is that one of the things you watch for younger quarterbacks, more inexperienced quarterbacks, like you mentioned with Carr, a guy who's going to see that safety valve and use it a whole lot?
Absolutely. And you try and look for a guy who maybe is on a team that's dealing with an injury at wide receiver, or dealing with a wide receiver who's off to a slow start. And somebody that comes to mind there, Dan, is Delanie Walker from the Tennessee Titans. On one hand, you do have Jake Locker, a young quarterback, probably going to rely on a guy like Delanie, especially when he gets into the red zone. But the other thing going on in Tennessee there is that the running game has been shaky. And Justin Hunter, a guy who I thought was going to emerge in his second year for the Titans, off to a slow start. So while he's still trying to get his footing, figure out where he fits in the offense, Delanie Walker is somebody who continues to just gobble up the targets from Jake Locker. It's why Dennis Pitta was a guy who a lot of people thought was going to have a good year for Baltimore. Now he's out for the season. Who knows what his career is going to be. There are certain quarterbacks that like to throw to that tight end. Joe Flacco's one of them. Now you have to ask yourself, okay, who steps into that role vacated by Pitta? It's Owen Daniels. So if you have an open spot, if you're in a pinch, you need a tight end, Owen Daniels is going to be the tight end for Joe Flacco, a guy who likes to throw to tight ends for the rest of the season.
All right, let's move along to. I want to talk about Josh Gordon. I don't think we've talked about Josh Gordon a lot. We now know he's going to be out for 10 games. He's going to come back for the last 6, just in time for that fantasy playoff push or the fantasy playoffs, depending on how many teams get in. If I'm a Josh Gordon owner, let's say my team is struggling a little bit. I'm a Josh Gordon owner. I'm not sure if I'm even going to get into the playoffs. Is it smart to maybe consider offering him to a really good team in my league and just seeing if you can get a ransom back and work your way back in?
Absolutely. Without question, Dan, I have him in one of my leagues. Now I'm off to a good start, so I don't have this desperation where I've got to start building some wins going towards the playoffs or something like that. I feel good about my team. Josh Gordon was somebody that I put on my bench. I actually drafted him. I knew that I was going to have to wait it out. I had to wait to see what was going to happen in the NFL with the drug policy, but I'm looking at a team that has started, we play doubleheaders in one of my leagues.
Okay.
This team has started 6-0. They've won every single matchup so far. They're a team that maybe would take a guy like Josh Gordon, stick him on the bench, and try and reap the rewards at the end of the season. And they've got a guy who's off to a really good start in Gio Bernard. So I've offered somebody who can help them in the future for somebody that is on a roll right now. It's those kinds of deals. Now, obviously, you have to throw something along with Josh Gordon, so you give that owner something that's going to help them now as well. But yeah, if you can get a boost at running back or a boost at wide receiver in the immediate future as well as long term, then I think you should try and explore that. But don't just go trading Josh Gordon because you're desperate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I saw somebody trade Josh Gordon for Matt Asiata. Matt Asiata's not good at football. So you have to, okay, he's going to help you. He's going to get some catches. He's going to get the carries in Minnesota. Josh Gordon is a top 5 fantasy receiver when he comes back. He's somebody that can win you weeks. He can get you into the playoffs. Matt Asiata is going to get you 10 to 15 points on a weekly basis. You don't want to make a trade like that. So maybe target a team that is strong at running back, and they've got somebody in their flex spot who has gotten off to a great start. I saw one team, Dan, in my one league. They've got LaShawn McCoy, Le'Veon Bell, and Arian Foster. Okay, one of those guys could be expendable if they can only start 2, or if they start one of those guys at a flex. Maybe you can throw Josh Gordon and something else and try and get one of those running backs back.
Let's kind of keep going down this road of trades because, like you said, we're 3 weeks in now. Teams kind of know what they have. Owners know what they have. They know where they stand. Like I'm 1 and 2, for example. Sure. There's some people that are 0 and 3 that maybe thought their team was going to be better. Who are guys that, if you own them, you see them as a valuable guy to trade because maybe their stock is at their highest right now and it might go down over the course of the year?
I think Kirk Cousins' stock will never be higher. I don't expect him to be a guy who throws for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns every single week. He's somebody that I think, if you want to, sell high on. Another guy to consider, in my opinion, is Lamar Miller. He's somebody who's averaging over 5 yards per carry. He's coming off a 100-yard performance, only got like 14 touches or something like that last week with Miami. You know that Knowshon Moreno is going to come back, and he might come back after Miami's Week 5 bye. So be smart. Be a forward thinker. If Knowshon Moreno comes back, that's obviously going to cut into the opportunities of Lamar Miller, and it's going to cut into his production. If he's coming off this 100-yard game, now's a good time to trade him away. Or maybe if he has a great game against Oakland, maybe that's a time to trade him away. But again, the problem is if you wait until he has this great game against Oakland, potentially this weekend, fantasy owners know that Moreno's on the horizon, and Moreno and the Dolphins are coming off that bye week. So those are 2 guys that really jump out to me. And if you're talking on the opposite side of things, Dan, if you're talking about maybe buy low guys, Eddie Lacy of the Green Bay Packers. Everybody is panicking on Eddie Lacy. He was a top 10 pick in fantasy football, and he's been a disaster in the first 3 games. But I'll say this. The 3 things that we know about Eddie Lacy. Number one, he's really good at football. That's how he was the offensive rookie of the year. The second thing that we know about him is that he has the ability to get yards that aren't there. So if you're concerned about his offensive line, you know that he can power through tackles, he can make guys miss. And the third thing that you know about Eddie Lacy is that he has faced probably the stiffest schedule of any running back out there. Look at the teams that he's played against. Detroit is a really good run defense. They allowed 2 100-yard rushers last year, LaShawn McCoy, Matt Asiata. He's faced the New York Jets. The Jets are one of the toughest teams to run against. So you have to look at what he's been up against and why he has struggled in the first 3 games. Eddie Lacy is a great target if you want to try and boost your running game. People are panicking all over the place in fantasy football because they're off to this slow start. Take advantage of that.
If somebody calls you or emails you or texts you and says, I want to trade you this guy for this guy, and we're going to talk about the second this guy,
okay,
who are you going to laugh at and say, no way am I giving that guy up for anything?
I think a lot of people are trying at the moment to trade for DeMarco Murray. And the thing that you do is, as one of the owners, you try and put something in somebody's head, right? You try, maybe they're overlooking it or you think that they are overlooking it. You say, okay, DeMarco Murray's been great in the first 3 games, but you know, Dallas loves to throw the football. Tony Romo's going to throw the football. You know DeMarco Murray is somebody who can't stay healthy. You use the thing that has been a trend for one guy against him as much as possible. So you do that with DeMarco Murray, and then somebody else is trying to get Gio Bernard. So if you're an owner that's trying to get Gio Bernard, you're saying, look, this guy's 5'8". He can't hold up to the rigors of the NFL. They used a draft pick on Jeremy Hill. Eventually it's going to go to a committee backfield when you know all along that Gio Bernard is such a weapon for the Cincinnati Bengals offensively that he's going to have a huge role for the Bengals, whether Jeremy Hill's involved or not. Those would be 2, and Le'Veon Bell is another one. Le'Veon Bell is somebody that people let slide to the late 2nd round, early 3rd round because he had the whole DUI thing,
yeah,
and because LeGarrette Blount came to Pittsburgh, and people felt like, wow, wait a minute. Part of the reason why Le'Veon Bell was so successful last year as a rookie is because he had the opportunities and because he got the short goal line carries, but that role is going to go to LeGarrette Blount. That's what people thought at the beginning of the year, Dan. Turns out Le'Veon Bell is one of the most valuable fantasy running backs around because he gets 25 touches or so a game. He catches the ball well, he's running well, and he's still getting those goal line carries.
And keep Le'Veon Bell at least until he plays the Browns in a few weeks, because we know that if a running back is playing the Browns, even if he's a 3rd or 4th string running back, you get that guy and you start him. That's one of those matchups
and you
to
know,
watch.
The other one that people are trying to trade for now is Julio Jones at wide receiver from the Falcons. My man Julio is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. He's always been one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. But you're using that thing that you're trying to get him away from that owner. Julio is injury prone. Julio missed some games last year. You might not want to rely on Julio. See if you can strike while he's hot right now. That's a guy that I absolutely would not trade, though.
Speaking of wide receivers, we have a couple wide receiver questions in our chat. A half PPR, so a half point per reception, Kelvin Benjamin or Sammy Watkins?
Well, I think both are good plays this week, but I'm going to lean towards Kelvin Benjamin on this one. You know, Sammy Watkins has a good matchup against Houston. Houston's defense, I felt a little bit exposed last week against the New York Giants, gave up over 100 yards and a touchdown to Victor Cruz. That was like his first touchdown since October of last year or something like that. So the matchup is favorable for Sammy Watkins, but I just look at Carolina and I look at the situation, Dan. And number one, Kelvin Benjamin's been very good. He has emerged as the number 1 target in that passing game. And because Carolina is dealing with a lot of injuries in the backfield, Mike Tolbert gone. He's on IR, designated to return. Jonathan Stewart probably not going to play. D'Angelo Williams not 100%. He's missed the last couple of games. Carolina, I think, is going to have to throw the ball effectively to win this game and bounce back off their loss against Pittsburgh. So I'd go with Kelvin Benjamin. I think all signs point to that.
All right, another question about receivers. This one is a 1 point PPR. Bo or Matthews?
Well, Dwayne Bowe's going to Revis Island. Now, Darrelle Revis has not been the player that he once was. New England's defense, it's been up and down, I would say, this year. But I still think I've got respect for Darrelle Revis. I understand that it's a big game for New England. They've got to prove a lot, I think, New England does, especially coming off the close win against the Oakland Raiders. And Jordan Matthews is a guy, Dan, he's coming off a 2-touchdown game. I think he's going to see his role increase more and more when it comes to the Eagles. Just go in with the understanding that he's fighting for targets with Jeremy Maclin, Riley Cooper, Zach Ertz, LaShawn McCoy coming out of the backfield. So the consistency probably not going to be there when it comes to Jordan Matthews, but you take advantage of matchups. San Francisco has been very generous to that second, third wide receiver, second, third target in the passing game because they've got a rookie, Jimmy Ward, from Northern Illinois handling that kind of role. So in this matchup, I'll take Jordan Matthews.
All right, starts and sits for this week. Let's go with must starts.
I think Colin Kaepernick is somebody that absolutely has to be in lineups. It's a huge game for San Francisco. They have been, Dan, one of the most disappointing teams so far in the NFL, and they have to get it going again, and it's a great matchup for San Francisco playing against Philadelphia. Look at some of the quarterbacks. Chad Henne threw a couple of touchdowns against them. Andrew Luck, multiple touchdowns against them. Kirk Cousins just threw for over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns against them in his first start this year. So you're talking about a defense that has given up 8 passing touchdowns and was the worst team against the pass last year. Colin Kaepernick against the Philadelphia Eagles has to be in lineups, in my opinion, this week. And I think Kirk Cousins, again, I would sell high on him, but he's got another good matchup. You're talking about Washington is at home. It's Thursday night football. The road team has lost every single game so far on Thursday night. It's tough. A short week, road team, Cousins playing against the Giants. I think there's going to be an opportunity for him to have another good game.
Who should people stay away from?
Well, at quarterback, Dan, I would stay away from Alex Smith. He's somebody that you might have to rely on because you've got 6 teams on a bye.
Yeah.
It's a really tough week in fantasy football. It is. But New England's defense has been better than New England's offense. And New England playing against Kansas City on Monday Night Football, Alex Smith is somebody who's not a great fantasy option to begin with. So I'd be concerned with him. Cam Newton, somebody else I'd be concerned with. It's Baltimore. I think Baltimore wants to bounce back after giving up 21 points to the Browns, allowing Brian Hoyer to nearly throw for 300 yards. And the other thing with Cam Newton, Dan, he just doesn't look healthy. Yeah. And part of what makes Cam Newton such a great fantasy quarterback option is that he gets those rushing yards. But if he's dealing with the rib injury and the ankle injury, he's not going to be running as much. He hasn't been running as much. So because of those things, I would probably stay away from Cam Newton. In terms of running backs, guys to stay away from, I think you have to stay away from the Baltimore committee backfield. I don't know if it's going to be Bernard Pierce. I don't know if it's going to be Lorenzo Taliaferro, and it's Carolina. What Le'Veon Bell did against Carolina on Sunday Night Football, it's not going to happen every single week. Carolina's defense is one of the best defenses in the NFL. I think that was more about how good Le'Veon Bell is right now as opposed to how weak Carolina defense is. So I'd stay away from that Baltimore committee. If you can. Again, it's tough because you got a lot of running backs on buys.
Okay, like you said, six teams on bye this week. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's some owners out there kind of panicking a little bit. Maybe they want to make some roster moves and they end up dropping some of these guys on buys. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But
that's good.
Are any of these guys on buys that maybe could end up in the waiver wire somewhere because an owner panics and needs to fill a roster spot?
Boy, that's tough to say. I can't see anybody from the Bengals getting dropped. Nobody's going to be dropping A.J. Green. Boy, I need that roster spot. Better let go of A.J. Green. I can't see anybody dropping Giovanni Bernard or Jeremy Hill, the rookie from Cincinnati who's been good. Maybe there's a chance, and I don't know that this is going to happen, but maybe there's a chance. If you find an owner that has Ben Tate on their roster, maybe they have Terrence West, Isaiah Crowell, and they're desperate and they need a roster spot, maybe they need a plug-and-play running back, a plug-and-play flex option, maybe there is an owner that drops Ben Tate, Crowell, West. If Ben Tate gets dropped, obviously go pick him up. I don't know if he's going to be back in time for the Tennessee game. But we've already gone through the schedule after that Tennessee game. It's very favorable. You can run against a lot of those teams, including the Steelers. Steelers probably the toughest matchup for the Browns after the bye week, Dan, but their run defense has been shaky at best. I can't see anybody dropping Zach Stacy or Andre Ellington or Marshawn Lynch. So the one that I would look at is Ben Tate, because he has been injured and maybe somebody wants to open up a spot for a plug-and-play guy.
Going back to Cam Newton, I know you're stashing my guy Derek Anderson somewhere. If I looked at your fantasy roster, I know you got DA just stashed somewhere waiting for him to come back and have one of those 2007-esque seasons.
Right, right. I sure am, Dan.
All right, that's going to do it for Fantasy Football Insider. Of course, not this week. You won't get your last-minute fantasy advice, but you can tweet to @Chris Fedor. There's no Browns game, so we won't have our little pregame show. But most Sundays, Browns Sundays, we will have a pregame show, usually post around noon if you need last-minute fantasy advice. And, of course, every Thursday at 12:30, find this post, ask your questions.
By the way, one last piece of advice.
Uh-oh.
If you
it's
need
DA,
a
isn't it? You rethought my DA thing.
If you need a quarterback, Blake Bortles.
Oh,
Blake Bortles.
Yeah.
Jacksonville, they invested in some weapons. He has Cecil Shorts to throw to. Allen Robinson from Penn State's been good. Marquise Lee, he's going to be back eventually. Bortles runs so he can pick up those rushing yards, and here's the key. In fantasy football, Jacksonville is going to be losing a lot. Their defense is the worst defense in the NFL. They're giving up 38, 39 points per game. What does that mean if he's trailing? Garbage time points, baby. Garbage time points for Blake Bortles. It would be a sneaky pickup.
What about your guy Teddy?
Oh, yeah, I love me some Teddy. And here's the other thing. When it comes to Minnesota, Dan, they can't run the ball. Who are they going to run the ball with? They don't have Adrian Peterson. Matt Asiata, it takes him longer to change direction than an ocean liner at this point. The only other guy that they have is Jerick McKinnon, and he still doesn't know the playbook well enough. He doesn't know his assignments well enough because he's a rookie. He was a quarterback in college, by the way. Now he's playing running back. So I think with Norv Turner there, they're going to throw the ball the way that the Browns threw the ball last year. Part of the reason why the Browns threw the ball as much as they did is because they didn't have a running game. They didn't have a reliable guy to hand the ball off to. Teddy's got Greg Jennings. He's got Cordero Patterson. Asiata can catch the ball out of the backfield. McKinnon can catch the ball out of the backfield. Oh, yeah. Teddy's going to rack up the rushing yards, too. Can we just keep talking about Teddy Bridgewater for the rest of the day?
No, we got to go. I'll tell you what. I'll just leave. And you can just talk about Teddy from now until, whatever, 5:30.
Two-glove surgeon made his debut on my birthday. Happy birthday to me. Thank you, football gods.
All right, that's going to do it. We got to stop Fantasy Football Insider now. Otherwise, we're going to have a mess on our hands. For Chris Fedor, I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.